Welcome, friends, to the Shae Show. We are at a point, friends, a time for us to step up and look at the touchy-feely, look into consciousness, start asking bigger questions. Let us get up off of those couches and start speaking to one another. Let us talk now about art, remote viewing, exopolitics, creativity, intuition, and our expanded abilities. How about spirits or dimensional beings? And a great segment I'm really excited about that I'm going to share with you is our psychic childhoods. And here we will begin the discussion of bringing new children into this world and discussing new ways of parenting. Enjoy my commentaries and my interviews with my many connected guests who will be sharing their journeys and wisdom, their piece of the puzzle with all of us. I believe that we all have a piece of this puzzle. Now I'm going to bring us into today's interview, Stephen Hamper. Welcome, Stephen Hamper, to the Shae Show, and I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about your work as artist as well as remote viewer. And I know that you and I are asking similar questions as artists to where our connections are coming from. And I'm fascinated and always have been with this, where is this creativity coming from? And of course then this connects us up, doesn't it, with remote viewing and other ways of exploring consciousness. So welcome, and if you could introduce yourself a little bit and give a little of your background.
Stephen, I've probably been practicing art since my early 20s. I mean, I've always been interested in the arts as a child, drawing and that type of thing. But it probably wasn't until my early mid-20s that I decided that there was an avenue to explore everything, really. I wasn't really satisfied with mainstream society and, corporate world and commercialism. That sort of bored me quite quickly. But when I started my art career, went through art college and so forth, just opened me up to be able to create in any field or explore in any area. I actually went to art school wanting to be a painter. Ended up being quite excited by sculpture. I felt it was, could make whatever I liked. And in the very beginnings, I was interested in thinking and exploring back to the ideas of the Renaissance man, so to speak. One person could encompass and explore many different disciplines. Contemporary art has really decontextualized and removed people from the actual art process. When I first started making large machines, I was actually exploring the work of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. I was wanting to explore how things are made. I realized that these people, why were they so highly regarded in the community at large? Or what was special about these people? The process of exploring, making all these machines, to me they were about engaging a viewer in an art space which wasn't necessarily done in the context that I'd seen it before, challenging a viewer to walk in and around objects. And I felt quite quickly that people were afraid of gallery exhibits and they were quite austere. I wanted to actually get people engaged. And I found that was difficult. So in the end, I ended up using infrared sensors and things like that to allow people to directly interact with machines, with pneumatics and hydraulics and so forth. Then I noticed there was a relationship that people could develop between an object. That led me to more about an acute observation of how I would try to engage people in a gallery context. But what I found the easiest thing to do then was to elicit emotions of fear from people, which was very simple to do. Later on, I realised, and now I'm come forward a bit, now I'm more interested in eliciting wonderful emotions and enlightenment and love, which is more difficult in some respects.
Yes. Well, they have less practice too, don't they, Stephen? We have lots of fear practice, don't we? We're brought up with the fear, yes. Exactly. Yes, continue, yeah.
So over the years, I'm not a prolific artist, but I do quite a lot of different things in my art. I use my art to explore what is. It's almost like a diary of my own exploration. I was interested in what I was doing, but I didn't really know what I was doing at the same time. And it wasn't till throughout that time also ended up opening galleries of my own. Towards the end, I ended up sort of having larger exhibitions or pieces that were being constructed by others, and I was directing them. That culminated in a piece which I just felt, oh, hang on, I'm just removed from my practice. So that was, I just felt I needed to go back to basics. I abandoned the gallery and ended up going overseas and travelled around Europe and so forth. Went with nothing, but ended up travelling around for about 18 months and creating a lot of work.
So when did this start to, become really an exploration of consciousness for you?
Yeah, well, this was the point when I was overseas in Europe, and because I had no baggage, I could allow myself to go wherever I liked without, go wherever I liked in my exploration of my work. What actually happened was I started again figurative carving, and I often use the female form. A lot of the torsos I do aren't really just about the female torso, but at that particular point, it was quite an awakening. I had an experience within about 3 or 4 weeks, even less, probably happened in about 2 weeks. I found as I was actually sculpting, getting to the finer details where I was actually sculpting by touch, really, and I noticed my sensitivity of touch heightened.
Oh, interesting.
And from that, sensitivity of sight heightened. And then I could feel the force in an object. Like force, I found out then I could balance almost any object. And then that turned into myself. I could balance. Was doing things that I'd never been able to do before. And that came to the point, and this was probably 10, 12 years ago. I didn't know what was happening to me then.
Yeah.
And I had no literature that I was aware of that I could understand this at the time. And it got to the point where, I felt I was almost,
Well, you can feel like you're really losing it, can't you? It depends, but it can get messy and feel out of control, certainly.
Yes, yeah, it was confronting, but I was also on a very true and honest path. I'd always been, I'd probably been introduced into spirituality through things like the Tao of physics, because I was always interested in physics and so forth. So that intrigued me, but and I was also reading the Wisdom of Confucius at the time, and for daily life practice. So engaging in all of these different modalities, the path I led opened up many things, many insights to me, throw them in my face. But because I felt I was doing the right thing, more would come my way. But interestingly enough, I look back now, and as even at the point then, I was sometimes sketching. I'd take a sketch pad around with me, and I'd just quickly do sketches. And I remember I was going through one place in Italy, and I looked through the window, and I looked at my sketch, and I go, "Oh my God, it's like that!" And I was almost lining it up exactly with it.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions for you, too, because the way things happened for me, Stephen, was when I was a child, I opened first. And I started leaving my body and things as a child. And I kind of did everything backwards from other people. So it's always been my life exploring what these connections are. So that's very interesting to me, what you're saying, because I think, like, I know with remote viewing and everyone, it is, the science, and there's certain steps that everyone can do to tap in and do this process. But for me, it was more like that, where it was all these things would come into the head, right? And you would receive these things, and then it would be like what you're saying. You'd look out the window and go, well, how did I get that before I saw it? Right? Yes. So, that's amazing. I think there's a lot of ways we can tap into this consciousness, and as we expand and open, then we are able to receive, right? As receivers, we're able to receive more of these messages, these consciousness streams. And I think for me, as an outsider of remote viewing, it is just sort of one technique. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely,
Yes.
definitely. What I find, I had no idea about remote viewing then, and it wasn't until 10, 12 odd years later that I even found the terminology. But what I did notice also sometimes, another style of work I do are these very large screens, light screens with layers of fabric and ply and so forth. But I often found a few of them actually, I do a lot of work with curves and flowing lines and put them down. One of the works later on, this was after I came back from Europe, pretty well, when I looked at it, I did this silhouette of a woman, which was of the girl I was with at the time. And halfway through, I felt this need to expand on the work, and I had this sort of exploding wave that come out through the abdomen. Probably about a month later, the woman told me that she's pregnant, and I felt I'd actually predicted or shown that the birth of my child in that work as it happened.
I'm all goosebumpy. Yeah, it does blow you away, doesn't it? And I think a lot of things like that happen to most of us, and we ignore them, don't we? We really don't believe in these things that to me are more real, than all the fear out there, say. So now you're starting to receive, and you're starting to ask where these are coming, where the intuition is coming from. So are you starting to connect this information then with knowing your child is on the way?
Yeah, well, that still didn't convince me. I'm the biggest skeptic. It's almost like, I always sort of asked my higher self or whatever, like, well, show me, and I need it thrown in my face. But I've had this happen so many times, hard to ignore. I've also done a lot of research then back into physics, and it wasn't until I read the work of, I think, Thomas Campbell, My Big Toe. He was a physicist, trained physicist, but he was talking about experiments where they were doing out-of-body, separate rooms, two people going up, communicating within the etheric realm, so to speak, and coming back and confirming it. Now, for me, this was like a, what? It was like, and I respected the word of this physicist, and this researcher and his methodology. So I explored that. That eventually led me to finding out about remote viewing, exploring the terminologies and looking it up. Now, I just found a video on YouTube, which was a class of how it's done, and this is a big revelation for me. I just followed I was just sitting actually almost exactly where I am now. Just late at night one time, and I followed the steps. I had this old computer, this laptop. It was a half-broken screen. I could just, squash everything down to half the screen so I could see it. And I followed their process, and I wasn't really paying that much attention. I thought, I'll give it a go. And at the end of the session, they showed the results, and the results they showed was of a picture of Stonehenge, a couple of posts and lintels. I looked at my drawing and go, looks nothing like what I've done. This is pathetic, And they went on to explain it, and they said, well, you have to be able to research the site because you may have drawn something particular of that site. So I thought, well, how am I going to check Stonehenge? So I thought, hang on, Google Maps. So I typed in Stonehenge, and I was zooming in and in and in, and as I was getting down to about the third or fourth zoom and close, I was like, oh my God. Oh my God. It fit exactly over the top of Stonehenge.
Wow.
Complete, even where the three stones had fallen over, and I'd drawn them fallen over. And I'd even drawn a little, this is unusual, I have to ask later about this. I'd even drawn a Google symbol up in the corner, and actually, if you lined that up, it lined everything up. And I was blown away to the point where I thought, this is so accurate, it can't be real.
Oh, aren't we funny?
I thought to myself, oh, hang on, this is my one chance at some amazing ability, and I've ruined it all in one go, and
Well, and from what I hear, it really takes practice like anything, too. So I think it sounds like since you were already opening, right, and with all your creative, artistic abilities and skills, it must have been easier for you to connect, maybe, you think?
Yeah, well, it wasn't probably until I actually left that alone. Like I said, I didn't quite believe it, but I knew it was there.
Yeah.
I knew it was something to explore. I was still in denial. I still did a lot of research, and actually within the time, and it probably wasn't until about 18 months later, but even within that time, I also make and help other artists make their work, because I physically make a lot of work. And I was doing a piece called Telepathy for a couple of artists called David Haynes and Joyce Hinterding. And they built this great big anechoic chamber, basically deprived of his senses and so forth, to induce telepathic phenomena. But I knew what they were doing, disconnected from the reality of it, even though I didn't say anything about that. But later, the point came where, looking at how this world is heading and what is going on and what can I do to be a part of helping this planet and these people and so forth. A sense of helplessness and what am I able to? And then it just sort of dawned on me, remote viewing. You have to explore this, to take it on board. You have to jump in. It was then I actually made a few connections very early on through Facebook. A man by the name of Jeff Harvey, who was ex-Navy intelligence, and also now he's actually a healer in all sorts of modalities. And he put me in touch with a fellow by the name of Rick Hilliard. Rick and his wife Sandra Hilliard run a remote viewing course in Western Australia, and the only course that is in Australia. So I contacted them. I was a bit sort of, shy and sheepish, because here's these, Sandra's a gifted natural psychic, and Rick sort of, seemed all cloak and dagger. But I spoke to them, and Rick was very open and receptive. I told him about my one remote viewing example, and he was very impressed, and he said, well, that's in the industry, that's a term that they colloquialise for, it was such a good response, you got to go out and have 8 martinis to get over the shock. There's actually a publication out by Daz Smith called Eight Martinis, which is a remote viewing magazine, which is quite good.
Excellent.
Yes, I mentioned to Rick, again I sheepishly he said, well, what are you actually interested in remote viewing? Because if you did the course, we'd like to task questions for you in those areas. And I actually mentioned that I was interested in off-world targets. You know, what's on the moon? What's at the edge of our galaxy? You know, what are the things that we can't see?
Mm-hmm.
And I was sort of, holding my breath, waiting for the response. And he said, "Oh yeah, well that's fine." You know, as it turns out, he's does a lot of that too.
Excellent.
So went to the course. The course was about 3 or 4 months away, and I was, eager, so eager at this point, having confirmation that this is all real and the people are real that are behind it. So I did the course. During the course, and this is where I'll start to explain about how people can get into the remote view. I had a few indications that I was getting on target as I was being instructed. It was a week-long course, 5 days, 9 to 5. I was getting some results, but I was still thinking then, oh, hang on, I haven't drawn something exactly how it should be. Or in the early stages, you get just little fragments of information. Now, the remote viewing process, it's now thinking of it, it's a brilliant way as a tool to enhance your abilities. It's a combination of drawing and writing that is basically trying to keep you in the now and keep your conscious mind out of it altogether. So you're actually just streaming information subconscious directed to the matrix, so to speak. So when you are actually in the process of remote viewing, if you think you know what you're doing, well, then you're wrong because you're engaging your conscious mind. So you have to, and there are protocols within the remote viewing framework which keep you on track to do that. That is what is very good about the remote viewing process. Now, from the context of where you are, people have all these abilities anyway, and you can bring them in and tap into them.
Yeah.
But what I found with remote viewing, and especially being a skeptic myself, at the end of the session, you can look at the question which you have not seen, and then you can look at what you've done, and you can say, yes, that was right. Wasn't, that bit was, that bit was, that bit wasn't. It's very structured. You have a complete breakdown of the information that you have received, and it's undeniable. It's right there in front of you. Now, what that also does later for you is, well, two things. To increase the effectiveness of your remote viewing, and it is practice, you can then identify within that time that you spent remote viewing how you felt receiving the correct information. So then you will notice when you are feeling that way, it is correct in the process. But also what that does for you outside of remote viewing in your daily life is when you notice that feeling, you know you are in those realms and it is correct. So remote viewing, I find, is like a training mechanism, all of those other abilities.
Yes. And as you train them, then it comes in. This is what I teach people too, so that you take it. It's not just to meditate to empty your mind, but then to use it in your life to help you to see and understand things from this greater consciousness, from this greater perspective. So that's wonderful. So you found overlapping in your abilities then. They expanded all the way around. Yeah. Excellent.
And that was enlightening. And very early on in the even when I left the course, I knew I'd got some great targets, but they still weren't convincing to the point where I thought, I use this. And I came home, and it took me about probably a month or so before I started to practice. But I quickly found in my own space I was more comfortable and less distractions, and was able to quiet my mind a lot more easily. But then I found my remote viewing sessions were containing more information. Initially, now this is where I'm feeling it's going to be helpful for me to teach people in remote viewing. I found the imagery I started off doing, I was just doing these sort of flat sketches, 2D imagery, and sometimes there are all these lines everywhere, and I'd actually spend a few days analysing each session to figure out where was that line coming from. I quickly developed a sensation that it wasn't just drawing the question. There was the sensation that I was actually there in that space, moving around. And I remember one of them, I think I did the session of the Buddhas of Bairan, and I actually sensed walking around, and then I'd actually drawn the scenery outside the image, like the landscape around. And when I found those pictures, because I found many images to correlate to this, I thought, oh my God, it's not just that. This is beyond what I expected. That was a breakthrough. Then I realized I could, and again, I spent many hours analyzing each session. And then I found that I was sometimes drawing objects which, in reality, they were like a pyramidal type structure on a roof or something. But I kept trying to draw around and around. I'd sort of just draw these squiggles. Later, I realized I was actually trying to draw this pyramid structure. So my next session, when I had that sensation of trying to draw around, I just drew a 3D shape of a pyramid, and it felt fine. It felt correct. So then I was, at that point, I was able to imagine to be able to draw not on a flat surface, but 3D objects, because I could around them. Now, the point I'm trying to make here is that you have to learn the language, learn your own new language of what your sketching is about. And I find people have all varying degrees and skills within drawing. For them to understand their own drawing language, like I've said to some other people, I've taught a couple of people, but one person's work, well, if it's a stick figure, what is that stick figure doing? What do you think it is doing? Because so it's getting them to compound on their own language within remote viewing. But what I've found is, see, when I went to do the remote viewing course, they were quite excited because I had a visual arts background. And so what I found when I was showing other people, I was able to see things in their sketches and scribbles which they couldn't.
Right.
And I could say, oh, hang on, those 3 lines in conjunction with this fit exactly on this. Notice that because you've only picked out a fragment. So I've through a visual language which I've had as an artist, I'm able to correlate patterns and so forth for other people within their own work. So at that point, for them, I was able to say, well, what you did there, you were spot on, you were on target, you were connected to the matrix. So remember how that felt now for your next time. They were able to progress knowing that what they were doing is correct, and got over those first few hurdles of where to continue in the right way of the remote viewing. And it's those initial stages in remote viewing, the first probably half a dozen or dozen sessions that you do, where you are either going to continue or not, where you believe it or not, or you believe that it's working enough for you.
So, Stephen, tell me. So as you started to look and then and then the skill became clear. I say they come to meet you, right? And as you asked for this skill to come to you, then you started to become better at it, and then you started to actually feel it three-dimensionally, right? With the next step then being there. Now, I hear of some remote viewers, and they say, I have a lot of orb consciousness around me, and I know that I've heard in some circles that a lot of orbs, especially green ones for some reason, are remote viewers. So I'm wondering, have you got to the moon?
Well, we actually did in our course, we did do a target on the moon then. So that was interesting in itself.
Well, how different is it, though, to, because I'm thinking like, with your exhibit and your show, and it was more of a photograph, a number or something, so that you're seeing, I know with remote viewers, maybe they get coordinates, an area, and they have to see that. But how is it different for the mind to go there? It's different, right? Yeah.
Well, yes and no, because the remote viewing protocol is structured and it'll keep you centered there. Essentially, it is just a construct of something that we can do naturally without this. It's whether or not you're able to confirm what you're doing naturally is correct, rather than just you might feel like you're daydreaming. But now I'm realizing daydreaming is a lot more to it than I thought.
That's right? And then I know now with automatic writing, right? There's writing as well, that you get that sort of verbal explanation with your remote viewing as well. Whereas with automatic writing, it is like tapping into the computer consciousness, right? Tapping into that stream in different ways, and then it's just letting it come out. We tap in at different areas. Does that sound like what you're doing? Yeah.
Well, half of what you do in the remote viewing process is writing, and it's just streams of consciousness of writing.
Yes.
You also find you can actually overlay words onto images directly. You can actually ask yourself a question in the process, and you write down a word. So now what I'm actually finding is yes, what remote viewing is basically tapping into that universal mind, that collective consciousness of everything, and we have access to that. I'm only still beginning to explore the realms of what is possible.
Now, I was listening to your interview that you interviewed Nassim Haramein there, and they're wonderful. That must have been fun. And so he sort of mentioned. So I had to listen to it a few times, of course. But so for me, there are different areas where there's different kinds of consciousness that we can tap into, right? And I think he's sort of in his own language. Right, we all have different words, but so that there is the collective consciousness stream, the sort of computer that we can tap into, but then there's also the planetary consciousness, and then there's a different universes. So this would be a different all. Would you agree?
To some points, yes, but Nassim relates this to being basically all knowledge is there, all present.
Right.
There's no distinguished difference between what information is stored in the vacuum of space. But he is more talking about how to access it. He talks about all of us having a point of singularity. Atom, every planet, every scale of dimensions. He works on a theory of scale of dimensions where they similar and self-replicating. But so to access information in a different planet or galaxy or world, he's actually mentioning that there is a path through that. So, for example, if we were wanted to remote view on a different planet, on a different galaxy, he would say we would take that path through the singularity within ourselves, our point of stillness, through the singularity of the Earth, through the singularity of the Sun, through the singularity of the center of our galaxy, to the center of another galaxy, to that sun, to that planet, to that individual, to that in that draw.
So it's only moving your consciousness to a different position.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with remote viewing, the way you task a question is very important. For example, you would ask, like the example that I have on your post is of the Vatican, but it says, Italy, Rome, the Vatican now. But so it's actually taken you from the larger place to the smaller, to the smaller, to the smaller. So it's directing you to a specific point. And Nassim explains that in moving through those singularities within each of these different dimensions to get you to that specific place. Because everything has an infinite within its own boundary. So to be able to access anywhere, you have to really pinpoint that. Now, having said that, just another part about remote viewing, Sandra Hilliard, who I learnt from, there with the remote viewing unit in Western Australia, she is a natural psychic, but she uses remote viewing to pinpoint and direct her psychic abilities to ask something specific, tool for gathering specific information. She does a lot of work, law enforcement agencies, missing people, that type of thing. So it's actually a tool to use your psychic abilities.
That's right. That we all have.
Exactly.
That's right. So, where do you think we are headed? What do you think is happening with all of us?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm hopeful that people are sort of waking up to a shift in this higher consciousness. I'm coming across more people that weren't necessarily aware of these things before, who are starting to inquire. Now, there are a lot of people who are well down this path, but the majority of people aren't. Why I'm particularly promoting remote viewing is this is a way for a skeptic to see that this phenomenon exists.
That's right. It's because it's the scientific, and you can get your proof, all that proof everyone wants. I feel my proof, see? But see, because you learn to trust your feelings, because it's a tool as well that we don't realize. That it's a great tool, isn't it? Yeah. So, will you tell me, please, about Particle and about what your efforts there and bringing and helping others with expanding their consciousness?
Yeah, well, Particle was a gallery I set up sort of probably back in mid-90s, and I've had it over a few locations. But I stopped that back before 2000 because I wondered what I was doing. What am I trying to do? What's my message? I had an audience of people, that would gather to these things, but I felt I was saying nothing. But
So this was a decade ago, was it?
Yeah, that was then. But I've only decided to resurface the gallery context in the last year or two because basically I realised, okay, this is a vehicle to communicate to people, and now that I am finding I have some things to talk about which I feel can help people and enhance their lives or make them aware of things that they may not have been before, which I find are more valid than the endeavours I was looking into before. I am presenting not just my work, work of many different artists who have something to say in these areas of expanding higher consciousness or making people aware. Not only that, but I'd say probably 60% of the content is directly related to those areas. I'm also aware that in the context of the art genre that people like a mix of work, and I still find artists, they may not actually know that the creative process is often directly tapping into these areas.
Well, and that's where I started. I'm, thrilled to hear you say that, and I agree 100%. Because for me, it was all these experiences happened to me, and then I started waking up with poems in my head and things at the age of 7, and it was definitely a receiving. And then my whole art collections would come, and I've received information in different ways. If we could just get more people even just being more creative and being open that they're more creative, I think the intuition will just open up, that they are just hand in hand, connected, aren't they? That's right. Yeah, and we can all expand that. Do you think, I know that you have a very beautiful life and you're very in harmony with nature, and your latest exhibit, I believe, was Return of the Divine Feminine, and with and mentioning Laura Eisenhower as well there. I was wondering if you could just, because I can see your steps as you open as the artist, and you're opening and connecting your intuition. There's also your harmonizing definitely with the earth and with the feminine. And again, I think this is important because we're at this point where we're balancing, we're dealing with our duality, our masculine, our feminine voices in our own body vehicles. So I was very interested that you had done this exhibit, especially from, a connected, enlightened male artist perspective.
Yeah. I've resonated so much with the words of Laura Eisenhower. I mean, embodiment of Gaia and so forth. And the work that I did for that was 3 torsos. And the torsos, again, and I'll just explain a bit about those. For me, they actually represent an exploration into the spiral. Now, if you look down at the top of these works, you'll actually notice that they spiral quite. And when I actually carve, it's not what I carve, it's how I carve. And I carve in a motion which is pretty well much like I'm carving a double helix the way that I work.
Oh, right.
So I'm carving down and around. And often I find the works, I'll start with a gesture in the work of how I feel like I would wish to go. But then combining just the technique of how I carve, it seems to form itself by following those ways. And really it was because nature showed me this path.
Well, but the spiral is very connected, isn't it? There with consciousness, with look, Nassim would love that, with the spiral, and very connected as well with your remote viewing and that whole world.
Definitely. But also beyond that, with this work, it was, I think, subtly, people may pick up on some of these energies just by seeing the works. But the message that Laura Eisenhower talks about is basically awakening that part in ourselves to recognize the sacred union between the male and female energies. And very early in my life, my 20s and so forth, I realized females especially had a connectedness to these sensibilities. Many of my women friends, older and much older than me and younger, have truly greater insights into this than many of my male friends, who I actually felt like there was not a lot to learn from.
Well, yes, I think we're just come into things a little more connected. Certainly, I think we can both take off from that point, though, and learn from each other, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I just think it's that women being child bearers and that, I mean, they're instinctively more compassionate and aware and connected. But that's the side of humanity that needs to be embraced by both men and women to move forward.
That's right.
And this piece I actually exhibited, and you probably know all the connections that I won't go into here, but I actually exhibited this piece right in the middle of Sydney CBD, at the base of the Masonic building,
Wow.
surrounded by all of the courts and legal structure.
Fantastic.
This is a place to start that vibration,
Right.
to start a place to resonate from here. In a sense, it's trying to just, would some people be affected by it? Would some people take the time and something infuse a slight change?
So what kind of reaction are you getting, say, now as compared to 10 years ago?
I'm also changing my audience. See, a lot of my audience before was very art-centric and, art community. And I find a lot of art world often makes art for art's sake and, art compounding upon art. Now what I'm preferring to do is, art for everybody, to bring everybody into that realm. So, yes, I am getting a greater response from the wider public in general. And I'm not necessarily focusing too much on the art world where I develop myself through, because what I am finding is a lot of the practicing artists and good artists I know, they're trapped in ego.
That's right.
The very nature of having to promote themselves and their work.
And I know, and so many of them, the connection really isn't even there yet. They may have skills, right? But that connection isn't there, for all of them.
I think also even bringing it to a younger audience who is open to possibilities is paramount. But I also found within the arts itself, contemporary art, it's been deconstructed to the point where artists aren't even physically engaged necessarily in touching their work or creating anything. That's not to say that it doesn't happen with people exploring themselves, but the art industry, so to speak, it seems to be removing artists from the artistic process. And that's what I find a concern, because now, looking back at what remote viewing can achieve with a piece of paper and a pencil and a squiggle on a page, you have unlocked something so much greater than you can imagine. Those basic skills that are inherent within us to be able to do that, which I'm trying to reintroduce back into an art context. Probably only discovered within about the last month or so. I was always watching that film Men Who Stare at Goats, and there's this funny scene in it where he does something called cloud bursting. I've always watched that and just sort of laughed at it, and probably, about a month ago I just thought, hang on, I'm going to try this. I was driving along and I did it, and no, I didn't really believe it, but a few weeks later I tried again and the clouds disappeared, and I'm thinking just another day I tried again, and I was actually with someone at the time, and I said, look, let's do it. And we picked out 3 clouds, just distinct different ones, so we weren't fooling ourselves. Bang, 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 disappeared. It's just an enhanced visualization. You see it in your mind, you visualize it happening, and the clouds disappear. Taught 2 or 3 people exactly how to do it, and they can do it. I'm still blown away. I've even taught my 9-year-old son to do it. He is doing it himself independently and showing his mates.
Well, there you have it, cloud busting, folks. And I saw your video. It's amazing. And then that's so completely different than from the remote viewing, isn't it? And there's just so much that we can do with our mind. And we're just children. We have no idea yet really what we're capable of, I think.
Exactly. It's that has again opened up a whole new area for me of like, what are we capable of? What are we? Who are we? Everything. And the fact that we do connect with everything. So, yeah, I'm, again, like you said, a child learning. What are we? Who are we? But
it's better that we get out and play with all these tools we have and start using them.
The cloud bursting I found a brilliant way to stand in somebody who has no idea, instantly show them something that they had no idea of, that they can do straight away. And I'm gradually will be presenting remote viewing as I build up my own knowledge of it back into the art context, the art arena with artists, people who are starting an art career. A valuable tool once they discover what it is.
That's very exciting. So this is your next steps then.
Yeah, so what I'm doing now is I'm fortunate enough to live in a beautiful place and about an hour out of Sydney, and I just rent a small cabin on a property who is owned by a couple who themselves, one lady, Gay Porter, she's a wonderful sculptress herself, and they have a sculpting garden up there. You can walk around, and I intend to turn my little cabin into a little gallery, and I'll be running remote viewing workshops from here and sculpture workshops. And
oh, fantastic. Please share your contact, your website, and how people can go and find out more about you and about your future projects, and maybe take some remote viewing lessons from you.
Yeah, well, we have a website that we set up for the gallery, and fantastic help from a girl, Ty Nugent. She's done a wonderful job on the website. It's particle-space.com is the website. The best way to get a hold of me is probably through Facebook. I have pretty well much a public persona on my Facebook page. All the information, just look up Stephen Hamper. And
you have a remote viewing page group there that I'm also a member of. That
yes.
People.
So with that connection through Facebook, I've set up a number of pages. There's pages for the gallery itself. There's a introduction to remote viewing on the Facebook as well, and a number of other pages I've set up for information. But if anyone is interested in any of these topics, they can just contact me through there, and I'll put them into the right group. But also, it's not just about me. I'm more about facilitating connections to other people and directing people to the information of where they can explore these areas. And the whole idea of the gallery, it's just a conduit for disseminating information of people who are much more versed of this than I am. I did a very comprehensive exhibition recently on remote viewing where I had the main proponents from the original CIA program who are also artists in the exhibition. So I have very good direct ties to these people, and anything I can't answer, I can defer directly to them, so they will have the best information possible. And Paul Smith is wonderful. He's president of the International Remote Viewing Association. He's very well versed in this, and lots of information on YouTube and so forth. And there's also actually a remote viewing group with 1,000 odd people, and all of the top professionals, most of them are in that group also. I mean, and there's so many other areas to explore, in remote viewing. I mean, I'm only starting to look at things like remote healing, where I want to go in the future.
Well, and it's wonderful to see us all the different ways that we explore our intuition and psychic abilities. And I know that There's maybe angel ones here and star seeds there, or people that like the scientific route, you know, like with remote viewing. But we're all coming together now and realizing that really we're exploring the same things and just using different language.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right. So I want to thank you for all of your efforts and for your time and for a really fascinating interview, Stephen. I encourage everybody to go and see your website and the exhibits and to explore their intuition and their creativity. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You're welcome.
I am intuitive artist Shae. You can find more about me, my Do Your Egg meditations, my Skype sessions at my website www.spiritsearch.ca. Friends, we all have creative and intuitive links. We can all stretch our creative abilities and connect our intuition. I think that that was a fascinating tale as we see artist Stephen Hamper and his journey connecting up into remote viewing and exploring his consciousness. I want to encourage you, friends, to take your steps, to open your mind as you go out into your day, and know that what you see perhaps is just the illusion, and what you feel is what is real. Until next time, love to you, Shae.